They assumed I'd walk away quietly. They believed my 2.5 decades of dedication meant nothing when stacked against youth and family connections. But when Julian Crawford signed my termination papers that Wednesday morning, he activated a legal tripwire I'd planted in my contract 23 years ago. A clause so precise, so ironclad, that it would dismantle the $1.2 billion empire he thought belonged solely to him. His pen hadn't even dried before his world started crumbling. He simply didn't realize it yet. My name is Ronald Fairbanks. For 25 years, I've been the invisible architect behind Crestwood Industries' technological dominance. That morning began like thousands before it, arriving at 7:15 with my usual black coffee, prepared to resolve the latest logistics crisis threatening our European distribution network. I should have recognized the warning signs, hushed whispers ending abruptly when I approached, pitying glances from junior developers. The way my assistant Amanda avoided eye contact when mentioning the urgent executive session. But you don't survive a quarter century in corporate warfare by being paranoid about every shifted conversation. At 10:30, Julian's executive assistant summoned me to the boardroom. Nothing unusual there. As chief systems architect, I'd collaborated with Julian through 4 economic downturns, 3 attempted mergers, and dozens of product catastrophes. I'd transformed his ambitious concepts into 38 registered patents, generating over $1 billion in annual licensing revenue. The atmosphere felt wrong immediately. Too sterile, too rehearsed. Julian occupied his usual position at the table's head, designer suit impeccable, those calculating gray eyes fixed somewhere over my shoulder. All 12 board members sat in attendance, wearing expressions ranging from awkward discomfort to barely masked anticipation. "Ronald, have a seat," Julian said, gesturing toward the chair positioned directly opposite him. I'd witnessed enough terminations to recognize that particular seat's significance. If this is your first time here, hit subscribe so you never miss another powerful story, and let me know your thoughts on today's one in the comments. I read every message. My pulse accelerated, but 25 years had taught me to maintain composure in hostile territory, never reveal weakness before this particular audience. "We need to address organizational restructuring," Julian began, shuffling documents he clearly hadn't reviewed. "The board believes Crestwood requires contemporary perspectives in technical leadership, younger innovators who comprehend emerging digital ecosystems and social marketplace dynamics. Younger innovators." The euphemism hung between us like a verdict. "You're terminating my employment," I stated, not questioning, confirming. Julian's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. "We're providing a substantial severance arrangement, 8-month salary, benefits extending through December, and who's assuming my position?" The door opened before he could fabricate an answer. She entered radiating unearned confidence. Madison Crawford, 23 years old, Julian's niece, recently graduated from some prestigious business school with 0 practical engineering experience. Her resume consisted entirely of summer internships at companies courting her uncle's favor. Her outfit probably cost more than most engineers earned monthly. Her perfectly styled auburn hair had that deliberately casual look, requiring professional assistance. "Hey, Ronald," she chirped, as though we shared some friendship. "I'm totally stoked to review your handover documentation. Uncle Julian mentioned you've organized everything really thoroughly." Uncle Julian. The casual familiarity stung more than the termination itself. In 25 years, Julian had never invited me to a single family event, never acknowledged the weekends I'd sacrificed saving his company from technical disasters. "Madison brings revolutionary concepts regarding Web3 integration and AI-augmented production systems," Julian announced, pride evident in his tone. "She's positioned to guide us toward tomorrow's opportunities." I studied Madison carefully. She was actively recording this moment, her phone balanced against her designer bag, capturing content for her social media followers. Her caption was probably already drafted. "Breaking barriers. Day 1 as Chief Innovation Director. Not for women in tech. Disrupting industry." "The patents," I said quietly, deliberately. Julian dismissed the concern with a wave. Company intellectual property, naturally. Your contract explicitly addresses IP ownership. I nearly smiled then. Nearly. Because Julian Crawford, drowning in his own arrogance, had completely forgotten about Clause 27.6, buried deep within my original employment contract from 2 decades ago. A single provision I'd insisted upon when I was 28 and cautious, when Julian desperately needed my expertise to rescue his failing startup. The clause specified that upon termination without documented cause, all licensing and operational rights for patents I'd personally developed would revert to me individually. He'd signed without reading, confident he'd never release someone so valuable. Naturally, I agreed, accepting the termination documents he slid across the polished surface. Everything's perfectly transparent. I signed deliberately. Ronald C. Fairbanks. Each letter measured and final. We'll need your credentials and company equipment, Julian said, already mentally moving forward. I stood, placed my access badge and phone on the table. 25 years condensed into 2 small objects. Madison was photographing the boardroom skyline view, planning her social media conquest of my former domain. "Ronald," Julian called as I reached the exit. "Nothing personal, purely business." I turned, meeting his gaze one final time as his employee. "Absolutely, Julian. Strictly business." The door closed with a soft click behind me. They believed they'd won. They expected I'd fade quietly into irrelevance. But walking through those corridors one last time, past laboratories I'd designed, manufacturing floors I'd optimized, innovation walls displaying my patents, I understood the truth. Julian Crawford had just executed his own corporate suicide. He simply remained oblivious. The drive home passed in a haze. 25 years of automatic navigation while my mind excavated memories I'd buried beneath deadlines and deployments. I remembered Christopher's 10th birthday. The emergency call arrived at 2:47 a.m. Our Munich facility's cooling infrastructure had failed, jeopardizing millions in temperature-critical components. I'd kissed my sleeping son's forehead, positioned his wrapped gift on the counter with a note, and spent the following 80 hours coordinating emergency protocols from my office. Returning home, the celebration had ended. The cake consumed. The moment vanished. Christopher had preserved a slice wrapped in superhero napkins. "It's fine, Dad," he'd said. "Mom explained you had to rescue the company." Rescue the company. How many identical scenarios had I endured? Singapore, 2017. Our entire Southeast Asian supply infrastructure collapsed during regional holidays. I'd departed on 90 minutes' notice, abandoning Elizabeth to handle Christopher's university campus tours alone. 19 days of 18-hour shifts, navigating boardrooms where I was frequently the sole American, the sole technologist, understanding both specifications and cultural complexities necessary to reconstruct our networks. I'd saved Crestwood $52 million. Julian's bonus hadn't covered my marriage counselor's fees, the marriage that dissolved anyway. Elizabeth's patience finally expired that Christmas when I prioritized a conference call over her parents' dinner. "They'll always come first," she'd said, packing. "Crestwood, Julian, the next crisis, never us, never me." She was correct. I'd chosen the company every single time. My hands trembled unlocking my empty house. Elizabeth had retained our real home in the divorce, the one containing memories and warmth. This minimalist space had become my sanctuary, my workspace, my evidence that I didn't require anyone. The walls displayed nothing except framed patents, 38 documents representing innovations that had revolutionized manufacturing logistics, supply chain analytics, quality assurance protocols, each bearing my name as inventor, Crestwood Industries as assignee. I poured expensive scotch, the bottle reserved for a retirement celebration that would never occur, and opened my laptop. Not the company device I'd surrendered, but my personal machine, maintaining copies of everything, every contract, every email, every amendment, including Clause 27.6. I retrieved the original employment agreement from 2001, when Crestwood was hemorrhaging capital and Julian was desperate. I'd been 28, fresh from Stanford with multiple advanced degrees and a reputation for solving impossible challenges. Julian had needed me more than I'd needed him, but I'd been young enough to recognize one truth: protect yourself. The clause was elegant in its simplicity. Upon termination without documented cause related to performance deficiencies, criminal conduct, or fiduciary violations, all operational patents developed primarily by employee shall revert licensing rights to employee while maintaining joint ownership. This provision supersedes all subsequent intellectual property agreements and requires mutual written consent for modification. Julian had signed it, witnessed by the company attorney who died 7 years ago, taking institutional memory with him. Current legal counsel had probably never encountered this document archived in pre-digital storage. I traced my finger across the screen, remembering that younger version of myself who demanded protection, who'd somehow understood that corporate loyalty was inevitably one-directional. They'd called her difficult, paranoid, not a team player. She'd been absolutely right. My phone buzzed. Amanda, my former assistant, texting from her personal number. "Ronald, I'm so sorry. This is completely wrong. Madison's already redesigning your office. She asked if patents were similar to NFTs. Then another from Wesley in engineering. Emergency meeting in 30 minutes. Madison wants to reimagine our development pipeline. Half the team is circulating resumes. And another from our Berlin division. Ronald, is this true? How do we manage the Schneider integration without you?" I leaned back, sipping scotch, feeling 25 years of weight lifting from my shoulders. They'd taken Christopher's childhood, my marriage, my health. I'd been hospitalized twice for exhaustion, developed chronic hypertension, lost myself serving. Crestwood's profit margins. I'd constructed their empire worth billions, created the infrastructure making Julian wealthy enough to purchase his yacht, his vineyard, his legacy. Tomorrow, the severance processing would finalize. My termination would be official. Without documented cause, they'd been meticulous framing it as restructuring, nothing performance-related. Julian probably thought he'd been generous, avoiding any implication of inadequacy on my part. He didn't realize he'd just handed me the keys to everything. I opened a fresh document and began typing. Not a manifesto or threat, simply a timeline. When to notify our partners, when to file patent reversion documentation, when to observe an empire built on my innovations collapse under incompetence and nepotism. They assumed I'd depart quietly. They assumed wrong. The scotch burned pleasantly as I raised my glass to the empty room. To the 46-year-old man who'd sacrificed everything and received nothing. To the 28-year-old who'd protected his future self with a single paragraph of legal protection. "Thank you," I whispered to him. "You knew this day would come." Outside, the sun set over the city where I'd spent half my life building someone else's dream. Tomorrow, it would rise on a drastically different world. Julian's world would begin ending. He wouldn't even see it approaching. Madison's social media presence was a masterclass in delusion. I observed from my couch, laptop balanced on my knees, as she documented her inaugural week as Chief Innovation Director in real time. Each post more cringe-inducing than the last. Day 4, revolutionizing manufacturing. Just proposed blockchain enabling our entire patent portfolio for maximum transparency. The traditional thinkers seem confused, but that's disruption in action. Innovation Queen. Under 25 CEO. Future female. The video showed her in my former office, now painted millennial pink with ring lighting equipment and a podcast corner. She was explaining to stone-faced engineers how cryptocurrency technologies would synergize with our automation initiatives to create paradigm shifts in stakeholder value optimization. Wesley texted immediately, "She just asked why we can't 3D print microprocessors." I've lost all hope. But worse was approaching. Madison had scheduled a company-wide assembly for Friday afternoon, streamed live on LinkedIn. I poured wine and settled in for the spectacle. "Team Crestwood," she began, wearing a blazer decorated with digital art prints. "I'm super excited sharing my 30, 60, 90-day roadmap for transforming us into the Apple of industrial manufacturing." Someone off camera sounded like our legal director, Veronica, inquired about the ongoing Schneider integration, a complex technical merger I'd been orchestrating for 21 months. Great question, Madison chirped. I believe in rapid iteration and aggressive pivoting. If something requires 21 months, it's probably not agile. Enough! We're going to sunset that initiative and concentrate on quick victories. I'm thinking TikTok engagement, maybe viral marketing campaigns. Did you know factory videos generate millions of views? The silence was deafening even through the screen. I could feel the collective despair of 400 engineers who'd spent years perfecting processes Madison dismissed as insufficiently agile. My phone erupted. Klaus from Berlin. Ronald, she just terminated Schneider. They're demanding emergency consultation. What do I tell them? Then Roberto from our Sao Paulo office. Our government contract requires patent verification by original architect. Madison doesn't comprehend this. Help. And Yuki from Tokyo. Madison suggested replacing our entire quality assurance process with AI. She believes traditional testing is obsolete. I'm losing my mind. But Madison was just beginning. The following Monday, she held an innovation sprint unveiling her masterpiece, a proposal to replace our entire patent portfolio with open-source alternatives. Patents are so Web 2.0, she explained to the horrified legal team. We need radical transparency. Imagine if we freely distributed all our innovations. The publicity alone would generate billions. Amanda sent me a photo from the session. Julian sat there beaming with pride at his niece's revolutionary thinking. Senior engineers appeared to be attending a funeral, which, in a sense, they were. Madison's critical error came during week 2. She announced a partnership with a cutting-edge blockchain startup operated by her college roommate to tokenize our supply chain. The company had zero track record, no technology, just a flashy website and promises of disrupting disruption. Each shipping container becomes an NFT, she explained enthusiastically. Customers can trade them like collectible cards. Someone asked about regulatory compliance. Regulation is just another word for innovation fear, Madison replied, completely serious. The recording went viral, but not as she'd hoped. LinkedIn's critics had a field day. Someone created a bingo card of her buzzwords. Madison Crawford Guide to Destroying Comp Annies became a trending hashtag. The memes were merciless. Her face photoshopped onto the Titanic, labeled innovation, heading toward an iceberg marked reality. But real damage was happening behind the scenes. Amanda kept me informed through carefully worded messages. 4 senior engineers had resigned. The Frankfurt team was in open rebellion. Singapore was threatening to terminate their partnership unless someone competent was reinstated. The Schneider deal was imploding with penalties accumulating daily. And throughout everything, Julian supported his niece. Every disaster was reframed as growing pains. Every resignation made room for fresh talent. Every client complaint was resistance to change. I documented everything, screenshots, recordings, email forwards from former colleagues, not for revenge. That was already in motion, but for evidence. When walls finally collapsed, I wanted a perfect record of how Madison Crawford destroyed in 3 weeks what had taken 25 years to build. The irony was delicious. They'd terminated me for being outdated, too set in my ways, insufficiently innovative for their digital transformation. But Madison's innovation was just ignorance dressed in buzzwords, incompetence masquerading as disruption. She was burning down the house to create TikTok content about the pretty flames. My favorite moment came when she posted a selfie from the server room captioned, "Why do we need all these computers when everything's cloud-based?" To very think, different Miguel, our IT director, texted simply, "I surrender." By week 2's end, Crestwood's internal systems were chaotic. Madison had approved a revolutionary update to our inventory management system that somehow deleted 4 years of historical data. She'd terminated the redundant backup team the previous week because the cloud never fails. I sat in my quiet house, observing the empire fracture from the outside, waiting for the perfect moment. The patents were still functioning for now. The systems I'd built were robust enough to withstand a few weeks of Madison's innovation. But the clock was ticking. Soon, very soon, Julian would discover that his niece hadn't just failed to fill my position, she'd set everything on fire. And when that moment arrived, when reality finally penetrated his nepotistic bubble, he'd remember that termination meeting. He'd remember my signature on those papers. He'd remember too late what he'd discarded. The email deployed at precisely midnight on Sunday. I'd calculated the timing carefully, late enough that no one would be actively monitoring, early enough that automated systems would process it before Asian markets opened. 38 patents, 1 legal notification. Zero mercy. Notice of license revocation per employment agreement. Clause 27(6), effective. Immediately, all operational licensing rights for the following patents revert to Ronald C. Fairbanks. Continued use without explicit written permission constitutes intellectual property theft. I'd hired Constance Winters, the nation's most formidable IP attorney, the woman who'd destroyed Facebook's copycat attempts and brought Google to its knees over algorithm theft. She'd laughed, reading Clause 27(6). This is beautiful. Julian Crawford signed away his empire for the price of your loyalty. Then he discarded that loyalty. By 6 a.m. Monday morning, Dominos began falling. First call came from Heinrich at our Frankfurt facility. The automated production lines had stopped. Every machine running my patented optimization algorithms displayed identical messages. License expired, contact patent holder, then Singapore. The supply chain management system, my crown jewel, the innovation that had saved Crestwood $73 million annually, went dark. No warning, no gradual shutdown, just instant, complete paralysis. Tokyo was next. Our revolutionary quality assurance protocol, the one that had secured us the Honda contract, ceased functioning during a critical production run. 4 million units of product stuck in limbo. I watched it all unfold from my home office, my phone on silent as notifications poured in. Constance had been thorough. Every system, every process, every line of code relying on my patents had been remotely disabled. 25 years of innovation switched off like a light. Amanda texted at 7:18 a.m. Ronald, complete chaos. Julian just ran past my desk screaming for legal. Madison's crying in the bathroom. The production floor is at total standstill. Then Wesley. The servers are showing license errors for everything. It's like the entire technical infrastructure just vanished. This is you, isn't it? I didn't respond. Let them figure it out. By 8 p.m., partners started calling Crestwood directly. Klaus from Schneider was particularly furious, according to Amanda's play-by-play texts. He's demanding to speak with you specifically, says the integration cannot proceed without the original architect. Julian tried putting Madison on the call. Klaus disconnected. The Canadian consortium was next, then Mexico, Brazil, Japan. One by one, every international partner discovered their multi-million-dollar contracts were now dependent on technology Crestwood no longer had rights to use. The emergency board meeting was called for 10 OM. I had a front-row seat thanks to Amanda, who'd accidentally left her phone connected to the conference room's Bluetooth speaker. What do you mean the patents aren't ours? Julian's voice was several octaves higher than normal. Veronica from legal sounded exhausted. Sir, according to Clause 27.6 of Mr. Fairbanks's original employment contract, termination without cause triggers automatic licensing rights reversion. You signed this agreement in 2001. I don't care what I signed 20 years ago. She was an employee. Everything employees create belongs to the company. Not according to this clause, sir. It's ironclad. Mr. Fairbanks retains joint ownership but exclusive licensing rights. We cannot use any of his patents without explicit permission. Then get his permission. He's not answering our calls, sir. Madison's voice piped up, shaky and confused. Can't we just, make new patents? How hard can it be? The silence that followed was deafening. Finally, someone, sounded like CFO Harrison, spoke. Ms. Crawford, those patents represent 2 decades of innovation. They're integrated into every aspect of our operations. Without them, we're essentially a shell company with nice buildings and no functional technology. But I have ideas. Blockchain, NFTs, we can pivot. "We're a manufacturing company," Julian exploded, "not a crypto startup." The meeting devolved into chaos, Madison sobbing about how this wasn't fair, Julian screaming at legal for not catching the clause. Legal explaining repeatedly that they'd never seen the original contract because it predated digital records, and Julian had never disclosed its existence. Meanwhile, my phone, my real phone, was exploding with messages from partners worldwide: Heinrich from Frankfurt, Yuki from Tokyo, Roberto from Sao Paulo. They all had the same question: would I be interested in consulting directly with them? The answer was yes. My new company, Fairbanks Technical Solutions, had been incorporated the day after my termination. I had already drafted licensing agreements, reasonable rates for companies that valued their engineers, astronomical rates for those that didn't. Crestwood would receive a special rate, the "you fired me for your niece" rate. By noon, the stock market had noticed. Crestwood Industries dropped 14% in the first hour of trading. Tech blogs were picking up the story. Major manufacturing giant loses access to own patents in shocking legal oversight. Madison's Instagram had gone dark. Her last post, a motivational quote about rising above haters, was being destroyed in the comments by engineers worldwide who'd figured out what happened. At 2:37 p.m., my lawyer received the first formal communication from Crestwood's legal team. They were requesting a meeting to resolve this misunderstanding. Misunderstanding. As if 25 years of my life had been a misunderstanding. I told Constance to schedule it for the following week. Let them sweat. Let them watch their empire crumble. Let Madison try to blockchain her way out of a complete systems failure. They'd wanted innovation. They'd wanted disruption. They'd wanted to move fast and break things. Congratulations. They'd broken everything, and I held the only tools that could fix it. By Tuesday morning, Crestwood Industries was international news. The Bloomberg headline read, "Manufacturing giant faces 1.2B patent crisis after firing key engineer." CNBC was less subtle. How nepotism triggered the biggest IP. Disaster in corporate history. The LinkedIn post that started the avalanche came from someone anonymous, but I recognized Wesley's writing style. Imagine firing the person who holds 38 patents critical to your operations, replacing them with your 23-year-old niece who thinks blockchain can solve everything, then discovering you don't own the rights to any of the technology your company runs on. That's Crestwood Industries right now. Bring Back Ronald. Within hours, Bring Back Ronald was trending. Engineers from companies worldwide shared their own stories of being replaced by someone's relative, of building empires only to be discarded. My termination had become a symbol of everything wrong with corporate nepotism. The memes were savage. Madison's face photoshopped onto the Hindenburg. Julian, as the Titanic's captain, labeled "It's just restructuring" while the ship sank. My personal favorite, a split screen showing Crestwood's stock price plummeting while Madison's last Instagram post about disrupting industry played on repeat. Then came the insider videos. Someone leaked security footage of the production floor at complete standstill. Hundreds of workers standing around idle machines. Another showed Madison in a meeting suggesting they could just use ChatGPT to replace the patents. The engineering team's visible despair became another viral moment. Twitter user Manufacturing Mike posted, "Madison Crawford just asked on a company call if they could right-click and copy the patent codes. I cannot make this up. Stock price from $51 to $28 in 48 hours. The Wall Street Journal published a devastating investigation by Wednesday. The Fairbanks Error, How Crestwood Industries Lost Access to Its Own Technology." They'd somehow obtained emails between Julian and board members from weeks before my termination, showing he'd planned to replace me with Madison all along, describing me as past his prime and lacking social media presence. One board member had warned, "Ronald, Fairbanks is Crestwood's technical infrastructure." Julian had replied, "Anyone can be replaced. Madison brings fresh energy." Fresh energy. The comment section destroyed him. Wednesday afternoon, a Reddit user on r/pro-revenge posted, "I think I know who Ronald Fairbanks is, and this is even better than you think." They'd found the Clause 27.6 filing in public records. The post hit the front page within hours. Tech Twitter went insane. IP lawyers were calling it the most beautiful contractual revenge in corporate history. Financial blogs picked up the scent like blood in the water. Crestwood's market cap has dropped 480 in 48 hours. Partners fleeing Crestwood, seeking direct contracts with Fairbanks Technical Solutions emergency shareholder meeting, called as investors panic. By Thursday, former employees started speaking up. Amanda, using her real name, tweeted, "I worked as Ronald's assistant for 7 years. He missed his father's funeral to save a contract. He slept in the office. During the 2018 crisis, he literally built this company's entire technical foundation. They gave him 8-month severance and replaced him with someone who doesn't know what a semiconductor is." The YouTube video essays began appearing. The Fall of Crestwood Industries, a case study in nepotism. One creator with 3 million subscribers did a 45-minute deep dive into Madison's Instagram history, showing her previous CEO attempts, a failed cosmetics line, a failed NFT project, a failed disrupting brunch app that was just DoorDash with a different name. Someone at Crestwood leaked internal Slack messages. The screenshots showed pure chaos. Day 3. Still no working systems. Madison just suggested we try turning it off and on again. Julian screamed at legal for 50 minutes straight. Anyone know if Ronald is hiring? The Financial Times ran a piece examining the numbers. Without Fairbanks patents, Crestwood loses 73 nanometers annual savings from supply chain optimization, 2 nanometers in exclusive. Contracts requiring his QA protocols 340 millimeters in penalties for non-delivery, 620 in partner agreements contingent on proprietary technology. Total exposure, 1.2 billion, but the killing blow came from an unexpected source. Christopher, my son, had stayed silent through everything. Then, Thursday night, he posted on LinkedIn, "My father missed my birthdays, my graduations, my games. He chose Crestwood Industries every single time, not because he didn't love me, but because he believed in loyalty, in building something that mattered." Julian Crawford took 30 seconds to throw away someone who gave him 25 years. He replaced him with his niece, who calls patents like NFTs or something. Dad's not on social media, so he won't see this. But I'll say what he won't. They destroyed his life for nothing. Now he's returning the favor. Good for him. 12,000 shares in the first hour. The comments flooded in. Children of other workaholics, spouses of dedicated employees, all sharing stories of sacrifice rewarded with termination. CNN picked it up for their morning show. The anchor actually said on air, "This might be the most expensive case of nepotism in corporate history." Madison tried to respond, posting a tearful video about cancel culture and ageism against young innovators. The ratio was brutal. Someone calculated she'd lost 60,000 followers in 4 days. Her LinkedIn profile quietly changed from Chief Innovation Director at Crestwood Industries to entrepreneur and thought leader. By Friday morning, Let's Bring Back Ronald wasn't just trending, it was a movement. Business schools were already planning case studies. Employment lawyers were citing Clause 27.6 in new contracts. The phrase, "pulling a Fairbanks," entered the lexicon, meaning to protect yourself against corporate betrayal. The stock price hit $21. One investor on a Bloomberg panel said simply, "Julian Crawford just gave a master class in how to destroy a billion-dollar company in 1 week." The emergency shareholder meeting was scheduled for Monday. According to Amanda, who was now openly feeding me information, the board was in full panic mode. They'd tried to get an injunction against my patent revocation. The judge had laughed them out of court. I sat in my home office watching the empire burn, feeling something I hadn't experienced in 25 years. Peace. Every notification, every headline, every meme was validation that my work had mattered, that I had mattered. That taking me for granted had been the worst decision Julian Crawford ever made. The best part? This was just the beginning. The meeting requests from Crestwood's board sat in my inbox, marked unread. They wanted to negotiate. They had no idea I wasn't interested in negotiation. I was interested in justice. 6 months later, I stood in my new office, not pink, not filled with ring lights, just clean and functional with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Seattle waterfront. The nameplate on the door read, Ronald C. Fairbanks, Founder and Chief Technical Officer, Fairbanks Technical Solutions. The Wall Street Journal lay on my desk, its headline making me smile. Crestwood Industries files for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection. The article detailed their spectacular collapse. $920 million in penalties, complete loss of international partnerships, and the final blow, failing to deliver on a Department of Defense contract, triggering national security reviews. Julian Crawford had been photographed leaving bankruptcy court, looking 20 years older. Reporters asked for comment. He'd said nothing, just covered his face and hurried to a waiting Uber, not even a car service anymore. Madison had pivoted, as she called it, to becoming a cautionary tale influencer, charging companies to speak about the dangers of nepotism, the very nepotism she'd benefited from. Her LinkedIn tagline now read, Former executive, lessons learned, available for speaking engagements. The irony was lost on her. My company had grown to 350 employees in 6 months, most of them Crestwood refugees who joined what the tech blogs called the Great Migration. We'd secured contracts worth $2.3 billion chartering with everyone who'd fled Crestwood's sinking ship. Klaus from Schneider had become one of our board advisors. Yuki from Tokyo sent SAC to celebrate each new milestone. Wesley knocked on my door, entering with a grin. The Singapore consortium just signed. They're offering a 12-year exclusive for the entire Southeast Asian market. Terms? Everything we asked for. Plus, they specifically requested a clause preventing any family members from taking technical positions without relevant qualifications. I laughed. The Madison clause. That's what legal's calling it. It's becoming industry standard. My phone buzzed. Christopher was texting from MIT where he was finishing his own engineering degree. Dad, my professor is teaching your case. Clause 27.6 is required reading. He calls it the Fairbanks Doctrine. Always protect your value in writing because loyalty means nothing to corporations. Amanda appeared in the doorway, now my chief of staff. Ronald, there's someone here to see you. No appointment, but I think you'll want to see this. Richard Blackwell walked in, the former Crestwood board chairman, looking diminished, humbled. He stood awkwardly, no longer the commanding presence from that boardroom. Mr. Fairbanks, he began, I'm not here about Crestwood. That's over. Dead. I'm here because I owe you an apology. I gestured for him to sit. I knew Julian was wrong to fire you, he continued. We all did. But we were cowards. We chose the easy path, avoiding confrontation with a CEO who'd become a tyrant. We failed you, and in doing so, we failed everyone. Why tell me this now? Because your story changed everything. My granddaughter just negotiated her first job contract. She insisted on a Fairbanks clause, protection against termination without cause. She said, if Ronald Fairbanks taught us anything, it's that companies will betray you unless you make betrayal too expensive. He stood to leave, then turned back. You didn't just destroy Crestwood, you changed corporate America. Employment lawyers are rewriting standard contracts. Business schools are teaching ethical leadership using Julian as the cautionary tale. You've given employees power they never had before. After he left, I stood at my window watching the Seattle sunset paint the water gold. My reflection showed a man at peace for the first time in decades. Not young anymore, but not past my prime either. Just experienced, valuable, and finally truly appreciated. The patents that had built Crestwood's empire now powered something better. A company built on merit, not connections. Expertise, not Instagram followers. Loyalty that flowed both ways. My laptop showed one final email of the day. The Federal Trade Commission was inviting me to testify before Congress about employment protection reforms. They wanted to make Clause 27.6 principles into federal law. The Fairbanks Act, they were calling it. I poured myself a glass of the good scotch, the same bottle from that first night of freedom, and raised it to the window, to the ghost of Crestwood Industries, to Julian's hubris, to Madison's incompetence. But mostly, I raised it to that 28-year-old man who'd had the foresight to protect himself with a single paragraph of legal text. He'd known somehow that this day would come. "Thank you," I whispered to him. "You saved us both." My phone rang. Another partnership offer, another company wanting the technology Crestwood had thrown away. I let it go to voicemail. They could wait until morning. For the first time in 25 years, I was leaving the office at 5 p.m. sharp, not because I had to save a company, but because I'd already saved myself. The empire fell exactly as planned. Julian thought he was firing an aging engineer. Instead, he'd lit the fuse on 25 years of carefully documented protection. The explosion had been magnificent, and from the ashes of Crestwood Industries, something better had risen. Something mine. I turned off the lights, locked my office, and headed home. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, new chances to build. But tonight, I would simply savor the victory of a man who'd been underestimated, undervalued, and discarded, and who'd turned that dismissal into the greatest comeback in corporate history. They'd wanted to replace me with someone younger, flashier, more innovative. They'd ended up replacing their empire with bankruptcy, their CEO with humiliation, and their future with nothing. Clause 27.6. 28 words that changed everything. Sometimes the best revenge isn't just success. Sometimes it's showing them exactly what they lost. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Drop a comment and let's connect. If this tale of corporate justice resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts below. Have you ever experienced workplace betrayal? How did you handle it? Your stories inspire our next episodes.